So Adobe released the final version of Adobe Substance 3D Modeler, Adobe 3D Modeler, a couple weeks ago. And if you don't know what that is, it's their desktop and VR hybrid sculpting modeling program. It does a little bit of everything, and it's gone through multiple incarnations. It was called Adobe Medium at one point. Before that, I think it was like Oculus Sculpting or something. Like, it was a different company completely, and then Adobe bought it and they've been developing it. And recently they released it, and not only did they release it, they put it behind a pretty expensive paywall. They put it behind their $40 or $50 Substance Modeler creative license. It's a lot of money. Now, you get like the other Substance programs with it, but the fact that they felt confident enough to put this in with those makes me think they think that 3D Modeler is ready for professional use and ready for serious professionals to use that software in their workflow. And so I thought we would take some time to take a look at how VR sculpting has come in the past couple of years, because if you're anything like me, I haven't really touched VR or VR sculpting in a little while, just because there hasn't been that much going on. It hasn't been that exciting. So I thought it would be cool to see where it's come, where it's going, and what's been going on with VR. So why don't we go ahead and jump in and see what's going on. Truth is, I haven't really used VR in maybe a year now. We've had this headset for quite a while, but honestly, there just isn't that much in VR that I enjoy doing. I find it to be a clunky experience. I find it to be frustrating, especially somebody with glasses. Whenever you need to change a setting or do something or update info, they make you go to the app or the desktop. And it's just, more often than not, more trouble than it's worth for me. I'm curious if you guys feel that way too. But I felt like this was a good reason to bust out the headset and see what's going on. Now, I've spent just enough time with this software to kind of understand a little bit about what's going on. So I'll try to explain the program a little bit, and I think we'll just kind of talk through it and hang out a bit as I attempt to sculpt a basic head, and then we'll maybe try to go into doing some other stuff. Now, you've got both of your sticks here, and the controls are pretty basic. So on the left stick, we have a tools menu that we can open up, and that lets us choose a bunch of different things. We can choose primitives, we can choose our move tool, which they call the warp brush. We have a build-up tool, which is like a clay brush, and we have a smooth tool. So those are our basic tools that we can swap between, and we can actually do those a little more quickly with the buttons on the triggers. But I'm gonna go ahead and choose a sphere, and I'm also gonna make sure symmetry is on down here. Now, one of the immediate things that I noticed when I was kind of messing around with this is that when you're in 3D, when you're in VR, there doesn't seem to be a way to place a primitive in the axis, like straight up, like down in the center or at like the origin of the scene. It seems like we kind of just have to guess and just kind of like place it ourselves, which I think is kind of clunky. And I feel like Adobe knows this, because I looked at some of the marketing videos, and a lot of times they'll start on the desktop version and then jump in VR once they have their scene established. So already it didn't give me a lot of confidence in this being a solely VR sculpting app. It kind of seems like they want people to have this hybrid approach to it, but we're just going straight into VR to see what we can do. I can use my trigger to put clay down like we did here. We have undos on our joystick, and we can do some things like if I press the A button, I can kind of go from subtraction to addition. If I hold the trigger on the left side, I can go into smooth mode. And that's basically our basics to be able to manipulate the model. Now, it doesn't look like I have symmetry on, so let's turn on symmetry. And right away it's messed up, so we're gonna go ahead and replace this down. I've found like I don't really know how to get symmetry to work consistently. You kind of just have to keep trying until you have something that makes sense. I guess maybe we have to go over here. I don't know, maybe. We don't want to have two spheres though, so I think I'm just gonna do this. And then I think I can turn on symmetry. Let's see, we'll go to here, turn on symmetry. So you can see it's off, which is really strange and frustrating. So we're already off to a good start. Let's just try this. Let's just put 2 down. And then maybe we can just kind of, okay, I think we're good. I think we're good now. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the warp tool and see if we can kind of use that as like a move tool to rough out the shape of our head. This feels okay. You could hold both triggers and like go out or go in to zoom or make the model bigger or smaller. And I found it useful to go in between the two sizes. Sometimes it is nice to work big, but sometimes it's nice to work like it's a little, you know, sculpty kind of figure. So I'm just gonna try to rough out the shape of my head. My arms already feel tired. Something I did notice already is that there's not any camera settings that I could find, so we're kind of flying blind when it comes to what the focal length might be in this program. I really wasn't able to find anything that tells me like, hey, this is 55mm, or this is 50 or whatever. So I feel like it looks fairly orthographic. So I'm gonna guess it's probably like 50 or 55 because that would be a logical standard. So now I can smooth, I can hold that trigger and smooth out. I don't know exactly what we're going for, just kind of like a basic head. So what settings do we have on our warp tool? We have size, hardness, and strength. The hardness, yeah, that's gonna do kind of what you expect. We're gonna bring it down, and then strength kind of just helps us maybe be a little softer with it, which is cool. The back of our head is very oddly shaped. I don't know, that's not great. Maybe we can use the smooth tool to smooth it out a little bit. I guess that's a good start. So now let's go to the build-up tool. So the build-up tool, we can hold, we can subtract, or we can pull out. So we'll subtract, let's undo a few. And we'll try to blot in some eyeballs. Seeing some artifacting, I'm not sure what that is. Okay. And then let's see if we can establish some eyebrows. Sort of. Very angry looking. The other thing I noticed is I don't actually see a way to save in VR. Like you literally have to take the headset off and save on the desktop, which seems a little silly. And I don't know if there's an autosave, so we're just kind of in it, you know what I mean? Now, usually there's a panel right here that shows us like resolution and stuff, and for some reason that's not here. I guess we'll just pretend we don't need it. What are we doing here? Build up. I feel like the best I can do right now is just try to get some basic shapes of the face. Feels like it kind of feels like it's my first time in ZBrush. You know, like I just almost more frustrating because I know what I want, but it's hard to get what I want. Like I don't have the dexterity, like being in a foreign body. Okay, that's cool. Try to get like a ridge going. Maybe some ears. Maybe we can pull out some ears. Something. Something. Whoa, whoa, weird. Okay. We definitely need more resolution. but I mean, it resembles a head. It's kind of a head. I'm trying to kind of just build forms up the way I know and sculpting like ZBrush. We really need to figure out where the resolution is. Maybe this is how I place a mesh a little bit better than I did in the beginning. Increase resolution, here we go. Oh, look at that. It shows us, you can kind of see the grid too. So we can go up, we can go up. I guess let's go up a couple. Look how, he looks kind of rough now. We'll smooth him out. Okay. Definitely tell we have more topology. But he's so blobby looking. Let's go back to our build-up tool. You can see how clunky the way I put clay down is. Okay, that's good. Let's see what settings we have on our build-up tool. We have hardness. Hardness is, it kind of makes it more like the clay buildup in ZBrush, but maybe not quite, versus, yeah, much softer. Very clunky though. Let's see if we can define the nose a little more. So my memory card died halfway through recording this, but honestly, it doesn't matter because this sculpt turned out like shit. And we can just kind of talk through it a little bit as we time lapse the second half of this experiment. Truth be told, I didn't really come around to VR sculpting as I was continuing on this. In fact, the further I got with it, the more discouraged I felt. And we'll talk about this a little later in the video, but ultimately I think I realized that this type of sculpting is not really the intended sculpting for 3D modeler. They do a lot more like hard surface stuff and more industrial design stuff. Now, I did see in their video, they do show like a more organic old man kind of sculpt that did look really good. So it is possible, but I think you'd have to spend a lot of time to really get the hang of it. I did find that as I was sculpting and I did increase the subdivision levels, that did help, especially with some details. But as you can see, like my sculpt barely looks human, and I would like to consider myself a mildly competent character artist. Like I feel like I can sculpt something that looks somewhat believable, and I just felt like it was my first time ever using 3D while using this program. And this isn't my very first time. I've kind of been using 3D Modeler here or there in preparation for filming this video. So the fact that I ended up still struggling so much was pretty discouraging. I did slowly start to get a hang of the brushes, and I will say, out of all of my attempts sculpting in 3D Modeler so far, this was the best one. That might be a good thing or a bad thing, honestly. I was able to get a little bit more granular with the increased subdivisions, but overall, I just wasn't really feeling it. At this stage, I feel like doing something like a face isn't really worth it. It feels like maybe if I spent enough time, like I spent hours and hours inside VR, inside 3D Modeler practicing, I could probably get the hang of it and make something sort of competent. But when I can do it in a fraction of the time in ZBrush, and honestly, not only in ZBrush, I've also been doing some iPad sculpting lately that I'm going to take a look at in another video with Nomad. And I am so impressed with Nomad and what you can produce with that software that it's frustrating how underdeveloped VR sculpting feels. And I've been thinking about this where, you know, Mudbox has kind of died. What if Autodesk took Mudbox and turn that into a premier VR sculpting program? Because it had great bones, it had great sculpting, but it was just beat in the market by ZBrush. And if they could reposition something like that to be the premier VR sculpting program, that would be really, really powerful, because as it stands, I feel like 3D Modeler, they're trying to do this like hard surface sculpting thing, like they show product design and making cars and stuff. It just doesn't feel like it's meant for the type of like character artist, ZBrush individual that really wants a more granular sculpting experience. And from what I can tell in VR, period, there is no programs that fulfill that niche. So I don't know. So I've been thinking a bit since the last time I was recording, and I do want to stress that I don't think 3D Modeler is a bad piece of software by any means. In fact, if you look at what some of the videos show, you can do some really, really, really cool stuff. And I think that it's just not a great VR only program. You know, they show creating all kinds of different hard surface stuff and kind of like industrial design stuff. I found a guy who did like a dragon. So there's definitely potential. And just to kind of round out this video, I thought we would take a look at some of the more rough concepting stuff that you can do in 3D Modeler rather than trying to actually sculpt like a face or anything. Maybe the strength is in the ideation and some of the exploratory stuff that you can do where you're just kind of keeping a rough mesh, but trying to imagine something greater. So let's look at 3D Modeler one more time, just some of the more conceptual things that you can do. One of the things you can do that kind of reminds me of one of those tools in ZBrush, where you could kind of just paint Z-spheres to create muscle sinew, is that you can actually just kind of paint this sphere. You can just paint it however you want. And so let's find our symmetry here. There's our symmetry. You could actually use this to very quickly rough out like a body or some kind of like shape, which is interesting. So like, right, I mean, on a basic level, we could just make this like a dude with some stick legs because he skips leg day. He's got biceps and he's got knees. Or we could do it to like, you know, think about like creatures and stuff. So I'm gonna stand up here for a second and I'm gonna find where my sphere went. There we go. And we're gonna turn symmetry back on. So, you know, for example, we could be like, hey, I have an idea for a creepy ant creature, and I just kind of want to rough out that idea. And very quickly, we could kind of sit here and create like a creature or a monster. We can kind of smooth this out and riff on it a bit and come up with something. He gets some mandibles. We could also use some of our other tools, so that we could use like the warp tool, you know, or like pull stuff out or whatever, fit like spikes. Oh yeah, I want him to be kind of like a spiky Ant-Man, and then come back here and add some more legs or more bits to him. So I think there is some value in this. Now, is it worth the trouble of putting on VR and messing around? I don't know, that's kind of up to you to decide, but I think it's interesting at least. And this is probably more the strength of VR sculpting and the strength of using 3D Modeler in VR. Obviously, this is very rough, but if you spend a little more time on it, I think you could probably do something cool. There is also things like stamps that you can use. Like you can see here, there's these rocks, for example. So maybe there's like a way to quickly block out like an environment or a world. What other options do we have? And kind of come up with stuff like that. So ultimately, I think what I'm getting at is that maybe the strength of this program isn't sculpting characters. Now, that's not to say I think that that's okay. I think there is a desperate need in the space for a really good VR sculpting program that you could create ZBrush quality characters in, that this program to me is clearly not fulfilling. But that's not to say there isn't uses for 3D Modeler. This is actually pretty cool. I think that's going to wrap this video up. I kind of wanted it to be more exciting. I wanted to really show how far VR sculpting has come and that it's super awesome, but honestly, I'm disappointed. And there is a very specific set of use cases, like looking at the Adobe videos, like the dude makes a dragon or he makes a goldfish. And so there's clearly people who can spend a lot of time in here and get good results and get interesting stuff. Is the hassle of working in VR, setting up VR, worth the trade-off to other forms of sculpting, whether that's on the computer, on the iPad, in Blender, ZBrush, Nomad, whatever? For me, the answer is no, but I'd like to hear what you guys think, if this is something that you like, or if you have been sculpting in VR, or maybe if there's other VR sculpting programs that I should check out. I would gladly, because I would really love to enjoy this experience and have the experience of sculpting in VR be what I want it to be and what I imagine it to be. If you have questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't stop creating, maybe just not in VR, and I will see you soon. Take care.